Yeah, we're back here at the Fort Gage site. So several references I want to point out today. And once again, we're about a mile south of Fort William Henry, at about a half a mile from the entrance of Fort George. And this is what we believe the site of Fort Gage in 1758, 1759. And unfortunately now it's a Holiday Inn resort. But in 1840, well, no, actually, Charles Farnham's work illustrated early travels of Francis Parkman, beginning about 20 years before the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865. According to Parkman, along with Henry White, began Parkman's second journey to the Magalloway River, which spans from northeast Maine through southeast New Hampshire. Parkman and White eventually reached Albany and proceeded north to Lake George, where Parkman surveyed the nearby battlegrounds. Farnham writes, they hired a rowboat and spent a week camping, fishing, shooting, climbing mountains, and hunting rattlesnakes. Farnham does not mention Fort Gage by name here in this part of his work, but it would be safe to suggest that White and Parkman at least saw this small hill on the rise just south of Fort William Henry along the modern-day Route 9, southwest of Fort William Henry as well. Further support could be seen of this in an article in the Harper's Magazine in the autumn of 1864 at the height of the American Civil War. Farnham writes, Parkman often expressed particular fondness for Lake George. It's perhaps after his home, the corner of the earth most dear to him. And Bernard Ritzer's work and map clearly indicates, in the exclamation part of it, the ruins of old Fort William Henry. And if you look further in that, there's a section called B. It was detached Vistana fortification, most likely Fort George. Just east of this fortification, the map shows a road to Fort Edward. You will notice several British camps situated along the road, east and west at the time, and I'm assuming probably one of them was probably right here where the camping grounds is to my direct west here. And if you move south along this map, you will notice some locations, Rogers Rangers, and some Grenadiers and light infantry, and a sawmill. In my expert opinion, both the camps, the Grenadiers, Rangers, and Indians on this map could have been the location of Fort Gage. I also believe that the Grenadier camp would have had greater likeliness for the fort's position between 1758 and 1759. David Startbuck writes three comprehensive books, not only on Fort George, but he also included very detailed information on Fort Gage, which agrees with Farnham and Richard's work. And my suggestion from above, which I had just mentioned, which I believe that the Grenadier camp from Richard's work was a more accurate rendering of where the site would have been. Starbuck writes in The Great Warpath in 1999, when it was published, one of his aides, or people from Fort William Henry, I believe it was, actually took me to the site. It took him to the site, which had an increased vigilance to drive collectors away from one of the soldiers' camps very close to Fort Gage. Fort Gage was constructed in July of 1758. Starbuck continues. This fort was located on the high ground about a mile south of Fort William Henry. Logs discovered in the trench during the 1975 excavation were found here. He goes on to write some of the artifacts found here and feature three in this book that he wrote, which was the Great Warpath. At Fort Gage, green bottle fragments, lime mortar fragments, wood handle, nails, and a Jewish harp. Starbuck continues in his book Massacre at Fort William Henry, which was published in 2002. On Site 5, the fragment pipe bowl was one of the most significant finds previously, the earliest dated TD pipe ever found by Paul Hury and Louis Feister at the 1758 site at Fort Gage, which was excavated in 1975. Dr. Starbuck also wrote Excavating the Sutler's House in 2010 and Archeology in the Adirondacks in 2018, which provide further clarification on Fort Gage's whereabouts and doings that the men and camp followers would have had during Fort Gage's time of existence. And Louis M. Feister's work and Paul Hury's work, Fort Gage site appears as a prominent geographic feature in 1756 on map of Lake George surveyed by Captain Jackson and published in 1776. Southwest of Fort William Henry was noted, a rising ground and overlooks the fort. As early as 1842, travelers recognized the remains of Fort George as a historic site along the side of which it doesn't parallel Fort George, but Fort Gage definitely is very close to Fort George, less than about a half a mile from here, and about a mile from Fort William Henry. It was during the Crown Point campaign of the British Army under James Abercrombie in 1758. Feister goes on to document. In the spring of 1975, a developer bulldozed the site as a prominent action for construction for a large motel, which we see here today as a Holiday Inn resort. And also on Reitzer's map, we can also see that same location today. It doesn't have the Holiday Inn resort, but it's the same location. The bulldozer and the construction company, unfortunately, did not obtain any legal permits to be able to bulldoze the property. But I'm sure in 1975 that some of the laws that we have today probably were not in effect. So that could be the reason why that happened. By June of 1758, the Army had arrived at Lake George, the British Army, and one Captain John Campbell was ordered with 200 grenadiers to post that night for the security of the camp, on the hill on the right side of the end of the road. That could be originally found in an author called Moneypenny and O'Callahan's work. Moneypenny wrote his work in 1969. O'Callahan wrote his work or her work in 1858. Captain's Campbell camp on the night of the 29th was probably at or close to future site of Fort Gage. The men were quickly ordered to begin the fortification, which became Fort Gage, and Colonel Whiting's regiment was ordered to clear the place to build the breastworks on a small hill, which lay about 100 rods south from the southeast breastworks and a road that is a beginning of the encampment. Sorry about that. The fortification, which Connecticut troops from Whiting's regiment helped build on the hill southwest remains of the encampment and east side of the road toward Fort Edward. Feister's map also concurs with this and identified it with the provincial light infantry in Figure 1. Across the road, which was probably Fort George, which is over here to my northeast. Um, Across the road was a small redoubt or fortification, which housed the advance guard and eventually built earlier. In his journal on August 19, Dr. Caleb Ray recorded continuing activity eventually in the new provincial light infantry readout when a large party of men began working on the hill in order to build the blockhouse and plant some cannons. This work ceased quickly thereafter. I'm going to include some maps from of 1776 from Brasier, William Brasier, Robert Sayer, and John Bennett, and also from Captain Jackson. They're going to concur with everything that we've been talking about today. I'm also going to include two different other maps which show the fortification which we're talking about today, which is Fort Gage. Moving on, Farry's work, Farry, discusses the archaeological discovery of one of General Abercrombie's troops' musket ball dimension, which was found on the site here from a Brown Bess musket. .65 to .70 was the scaling of that. This finally supports and proves the physical presence and a measure of military activity with close-up proximity to the fortification which became Fort Gage, as we're talking about. And also this Brown Bess musket ball was also found. A similar one was found on Rogers Island, which we just had a documentary about 2 weeks ago on, and we had discovered some things that were very similar. In the extract of the letter from General Abercrombie to the Right Honorable Mr. Secretary Pitt in 1758, he detailed some information regarding the maneuverings from Lake George to Ticonderoga. We know that about half a mile from the small fortification close to the old military road path as Fort Gage, Fred Anderson added some clarity on Macom's position at Lake George. By the last week of June 1758, Abercrombie has established his headquarters beside the wreck of Fort William Henry, which is just less than a mile from where we're standing right now from the Fort Gage site. Moving on, John Fisk's work wrote in 1902 about Abercrombie and his worlds. At the end of June of 1758. Excuse me, I'm sorry. At the June of 1758, Abercrombie's army and men was encamped at the head of Lake George, where Johnson had defeated Dieskau in the Battle of Lake George 3 years earlier, where scarcely 10 months had elapsed since the horrors of Fort William Henry, known as the Siege of Fort William Henry or the Siege and Massacre of Fort William Henry in August of 1757, which we'll cover in a later documentary because it's going to be a long one, and it's actually something that I wrote my master's thesis on. So we'll be doing some very detailed work on that documentary. Not like we don't do that in any other documentary, but we do. Abercrombie had collected at the spot more than 6,000 British regulars and 9,000 British troops. In all, more than 15,000, the largest army that had ever collected in North America. Task before him was to do what Johnson had failed to do some years earlier, and Abercrombie succeeded doing that. So once again, I thank you for watching my documentaries and supporting my business and supporting me as we go along. And I appreciate your attention. I appreciate your subscribing and liking my channel. Please do that again. And we'll be back again probably sometime later on in the week with a short documentary on Fort Miller in Washington County. Thank you once again. I appreciate it. Take care of your families. Love your families. God bless. And we're here so you can know your history. Take care. Have a great day.